BruCast is back, baby.
This BruCast episode is brought to you by the BruCast Store. Explore a store filled with awesome goodies from hoodies to t-shirts to mugs. We've got you covered. Stay in style with BruCast. Embrace the shock, set the trend. Visit now bru-cast.com/store. Link below. Alright, hi everyone, welcome back to another BruCast episode. If it's your first time watching the show, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rank the show 5 stars. This will ensure that the podcast is recommended to even more people and allow me to keep doing what I love. BruCast also on Instagram, X, and TikTok, where we upload shorts with the highlights of the show. So follow now BruCast on Instagram, X, and TikTok. Links on the description below. Our guest today is Dr. Shafer. She's a mom, physician, and neurologist. Neurologist. She empowers others to reclaim their stories and achieve their goals, drawing from her own journey of overcoming personal and professional challenges. All right, how are you doing, Dr. Shafer?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the BruCast podcast. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm excited to have you here. So that's impressive. So you're a mom, physician, neurologist. So what's the limit? What's next?
Well, my intro for my podcast, because that's the place that I meet people on Talks with Dr. Shafer, the most common place to meet new people, is actually, so I'm a physician, mom, life coach, author, publisher. I also produce another podcast for children. It's a literary podcast that actually my daughter hosts. So really there's no limit to what we can do once we actually work on our mindset and we harness our energy and stop losing it to sources that are just draining us and not filling us. That's where the magic happens, and really the potential is endless. You can go anywhere you want to go, but you have to harness that energy.
That's beautiful. All right. So how old? So your daughter has her own podcast. Did you? I guess you influence her somehow.
I did indirectly.
Indirectly.
So yeah, indirectly. What happened with that? With my children, I really like to expose them to a variety of things. Music, literature, travel, food from all different cultures, people, and just allow them to decide what they want to try. They try it, they love it, they don't, just allow them to feel that autonomy in their lives, because I am so passionate about young people having really appropriate opportunities to flex that muscle of making choices, of failing, of succeeding, seeing how that feels, and just learning what it is to be alive and to make choices. Because we can't make all the choices for them until they're 18 and then throw them out into the world and say, well, good luck, honey. I'm sure you'll do great. Well, how could they, right? So when I was homeschooling my daughter a few years ago, which was an effect of the COVID pandemic, we were homeschooling for a few years. One of the things she wanted to do was write a book. And so I actually have it here. I know a lot of these episodes are not visual, but for any YouTube. So it's like my blanket now. I keep her books by me basically everywhere I go. So she wrote her first book, Fox Tales, when she was 8 as a part of her homeschooling curriculum with me. I was her typist and her editor. And it was published. We weren't intending to sell it. It was not a money-making opportunity. It was a growth opportunity for her, because in our family at that time, we were going through a big shift. Her father and I were going through a separation and divorce, and it was a beautiful way to help her focus her energy on what she could control, on her creativity, to play out emotions through the characters, and for that to just be the year that she published a book, not the year that she went through something else. Yes, that was there, but she could choose to make her experience of that year different by altering her focus. So we did that and asked our local bookstore, it's called McLean and Eakin. And in the US, it's just one of the most lovely independent bookstores in the US. And we just are lucky enough to live in this town that has them. And we asked them, would you be kind enough to put maybe 6 copies in the store, just so, if friends come, if family comes, they could say, oh, we'd love to buy Amelie's book. And they said, absolutely, we'd love to. But then what happened was the next week they called and asked for more.
Wow.
And then the next week they called and asked for more. And then the next week they called and asked for more. And it was this realization for her and for me, like, wow, I mean, I knew this was a beautiful book, but it's really resonating with people and people want to read it. They want to share it with their children. And so from that was born another book, Foxtails 2. Her first is Foxtails, a third book that's coming out later this year, Wolf Tales. And as I was promoting Foxtails, which came out this winter, she ended up doing a TV spot, and it was her first big TV spot. I mean, all the lights,
No
these
way.
wonderful adult interviewers. There was no prep. They put a microphone on her, and I was all dressed up to go on with her. And she turned to me seconds before she went on air, and she said, Mom, I'm really scared, but I really want to do this by myself. I really want to do this by myself. And I said, absolutely. You can do this. Absolutely. I'll be here watching. So she goes up and she has this probably 5-minute long live TV interview that she's really had no prep for. And she does a fantastic job. And she's talking about advocating for other young people who want to write and advocating for animals and all of her philanthropy that she does also as a part of her writing. And it was so inspiring. And she marches off the stage and comes to me. And the first thing she says is, Mom, that was amazing. When can I do that again?
Oh man, that's wonderful. She's she's
I
already
was
like a
floored.
success, a huge success.
I
Uh
was just floored. And I said, well, how are we going to make this happen for you? Right?
yeah,
What's the mechanism? Because we live in northern Michigan. We
okay.
don't have a lot of opportunities to be on a TV station for an interview. I think we drove an hour and a half to get there that morning. And so we contemplated on it, and she said pretty quickly, well, Mom, you have a podcast. Why don't I start a podcast? And I can help interview other young authors and give them this opportunity, because this was amazing to go and use my voice. And I want other kids to have this opportunity. And I was just like, of course, let's do it. So that's how her podcast was born, which is Talks with, What's Up Young Authors.
What's up, young authors? Authors.
Yeah.
Okay, that's wonderful. What I think it's particularly wonderful is how you're like encouraging her on take all of
Mm.
those initiatives, and from a young age, she sees that she has some action. She can take some action and have an influence on the world around her. That's really inspiring. Wow.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
if you know, like, whatever you do in a young age, you know that. I think everyone knows that. Whatever you do when you're younger, like, that influences your whole life. Is if she, from this young age, she knows, like, she has all that power that most people never discover throughout their lives. Like, some people pass through life not doing anything, unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
Maybe when they have like 40 years, they have like a middle age crisis, and they're like, whoa, I'm wasting my life, right?
Mm.
Isn't that the beautiful quote that goes, every man has two lives, one
Mm.
before one before he realizes he only has one. And I'm butchering the quote.
Yeah,
But if
that's so beautiful. Yeah.
you heard it before, so in the second life, when he realizes he just has one, something like that.
Oh, it's so true. And I'm
Yeah,
I'm was so interested in the choice of words you used with power,
yeah.
because that is the word that she always chooses. I usually choose to say to use your voice. So this isn't something she picked up from me, but on several interviews she's done, she has said, including that first one, that it's amazing to show the power that children have through doing something like writing a book. And I think it just really is really reflective of the inner world of children, of really wanting to feel powerful. They have so much energy and so much to give, so much that they can do and say for this world, but we don't necessarily give them opportunities. Maybe we overschedule them with things that their passion is not in because, we're trying to be well-meaning and, well, my family did this sport, they should do this sport. Or, well, this will look really good on their CV for college and they're like 8 or 9 and 10, and really we should be leaning into what inspires them so that they don't learn a skill. They don't learn how to play soccer, they don't learn how to write, or, whatever the skill is that they're actually practicing. They learn a life skill, which is that it's okay to try, to lean in, to fail, that failures are not to be feared. The biggest fear should be if you're afraid of failing, right? We want our kids to know that it's exciting to try new things and that mistakes are just opportunities to learn. So it's so important that when we are providing these safe spaces for our children, that we are making sure that we are really intentional, that our goal is not that they're great at soccer or great at skiing or they win so many medals. The goal is that they develop as a person the skills that will help them flourish as an adult.
Beautiful, of course. And the thing is, when you're an adult, you might have family, you might have kids, you might have a job, you might have a lot of compromises that unfortunately you just won't have the time to try those things and to fail, because if you fail you might lose the house, you might lose, I don't know what might happen. So that's
Yeah.
really beautiful that you're encouraging her from a young age to take all of those chances. Yeah.
But to get back to what you were saying about the two lives, because this is the next part of it, right? Failing can be devastating, but what is the thing that people say on their deathbed that they regret not doing? It's not the things they did. It's the things, the choices that they really wanted to make, the risks they wanted to take that they didn't. Because as you said, we get through that first part of our lives, and then we often have just a timing. I think it's a neurodevelopmental timing because the way that our brain is developing. In our 30s, maybe 40s, we finally recognize, oops, this is my life. And I've been directing my energy externally, trying to win these awards, trying to win approval and prove my wholeness, when really I just needed to look within and find what really nourishes me so that then I can seek activities and groups of people where I belong and where I'm in alignment with my values and goals. And there I can make the truly grand impact that I really wish to, that I really can't if I'm just following along someone else's dreams for me or wishes for me, but they're not mine.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Do you think that's something that they could teach us in school? Because that's not something that like they teach us directly. Maybe a parent or a grandparent, but so do you think that's something let's could be taught, or do you think that's something that we all need to go through in life in order to
Yeah.
understand? What do you think?
Yes, and yes. I think you're right on both, right? Because it's better it's better caught than taught, is
Yeah.
the saying, right? You catch it, it's modeled for you. And that's why I think, I would like at some point in time in my career, not at this very moment in time, but potentially even in the near future, I would like to be more active in a more public health standpoint and advocate for things like education about mindfulness and neurodevelopmental appropriateness of activities in our school systems, because we really miss so many opportunities to teach children about really fundamental concepts when they're young. And then all of this, honestly, trauma happens to them because this wasn't modeled for them necessarily at home. It wasn't modeled at school, and the curriculum was so focused on mathematics and science and English and gymnasium and all of these things that are so important and wonderful opportunities to give to kids. But then over time, it shifted to, well, what's the metric? Is it that they're learning enough and that they're just learning how to learn, or is it that they're making this many points on this test? And now it's not just the school test. Now it's the statewide test and a nationwide test. And so we're focusing on all these external metrics, and we're really not necessarily doing a great job of focusing on our kids learning these life skills. And if a child doesn't learn about bodily autonomy, if they don't learn about what freedom really means and that it's not just, the freedoms we think about. There's a lot of conversation about certain freedoms in the United States. Fundamentally, it's freedom to be you, right? And sometimes we get caught in these other, again, external relationship discussions about freedom, but it's freedom to be you. So even though we are so focused, rightly so, on the need for freedom, which is truly a human right that is necessary for not only our happiness, but for us to be healthy, because when we're not free, you will see your health is just going to deteriorate, your neurological, psychological body. You are going to see consequences of that over time. It's very necessary. But like you were talking about, are we taking the opportunity to really explain that to young people so that when they go to college and they're at that party and someone offers them something they don't want, they have the internal response, you know what, that doesn't align with my values, so I'm not going to do it. Instead of what I think is a very common response of, well, I want them to like me, so I better go along. I better lose this really important part of myself, of my values and beliefs, to fit into their box of what I should be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Social pressure, you want to fit in, like that's something very hard to go against it, right? Especially at a young age, like because your friends and your social circle mean so much. I remember as a teen, like how my friends perceived me was my world, was my life. I had to be this cool guy, the skater boy who liked music, rock and roll, and had like the I had like black polish, nail polish, and I thought it was like the coolest kid ever. And nowadays, I just, of course, I just look back and, gosh, why did I care so much about what
Mm.
other people thought about me? It's like such a waste of energy.
Mm.
But I don't know. I don't know. But
Yeah, we've all been there.
yeah, we all been there. We all been
Yep.
there. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the freedom part, and you mentioned that the lack of freedom is actually detrimental to your neurological
Mm.
state.
Yeah.
Could you talk? Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And to, make sure that I'm linking it with a story
Of
because I
course.
think that things are best communicated through stories. And that's what my channel is all about, and my
Mm,
efforts are about helping people reclaim their stories. I want to share a little bit about how I reclaimed my
of
story.
course.
So, I was in an almost 2 decade long relationship where I was really slowly, systematically stripped of my ability to make choices, my ability to have my freedom, very reasonable freedoms, access to finances, ability to work where you want to work, ability to go where you want to go or speak to who you want to speak to. And that was happening systematically. And it was kind of a frog in boiling water
Mm-hmm.
situation, right? Where it's happening bit by bit and the frog doesn't notice. Now, fortunately for me, as that was happening, and I was really just losing sight of who I was as a person, someone actually told me, and I really believe that this statement was the first jumping off point for me coming back to myself. They told me and asked the question, do you know that you matter? That your life matters too? Because they finally got a glimpse of what was happening, that in my world, it didn't matter. And I was buying into that fallacy, right? That had my buy-in. And it was slowly really killing me. I was just a shadow of who I'd been. Once that awareness was brought to my mind, it was like a jolt. And these things don't change overnight. And that was a very well embedded mindset for me, that I had bought into this idea of my lack of self worth and what I was there for, really to serve others and to really not bother anyone with my needs and not meet my needs and not have my freedom. So when this happened, and you kind of start stretching these muscles that you haven't stretched for a really long time, it's painful. It requires a lot of difficult mindset work. And it's in part why I'm so passionate about podcasting, because I believe, my best friend saying that to me and then having access to resources like podcasts. There's a wonderful doctor in Texas. He's retired now, but he's a therapist and he does amazing little blurbs on dealing with controlling people. His name is Les Carter. And Dr. Carter, listening to him, I would not have been able to have reached out to a therapist at that point in time and had privacy in that setting. I didn't have even access to funds to make certain decisions about, having a life coach or something like that. But I was able to listen to a podcast. And that particular person and other people, professionals who were so generously sharing this information, I was able to have just this little safe space where I could listen in to them and learn and grow my mindset. And it was really painful because yes, things were happening to me, but I had to learn to get out of the place that the change was going to come from me, that I couldn't get that change. That freedom was not going to be gained by convincing someone of what they were putting me through, of what was happening to me. I had to initiate change. It was like I was on a hamster wheel and I was running, running, running and begging the wheel to take me somewhere new. It wasn't made for that. But I was made to run, I was made to move. So instead of running in one place, I could reframe the situation and see that hamster wheel. It's not a cage, as I had felt it was. It was a hamster wheel, and I could step off of it and go in a different direction and keep my energy for myself so that for myself and for my family, I could actually do amazing things. I could live my life. I could use my energy to help not only myself, but others. But I wasn't going to do that on that hamster wheel.
Wow, that's a wonderful analogy. Hamster wheel. It's not a cage. So from your description, it sounded very much like an abusive relationship. And from what I know, abusive relationships, they are when you're inside one of them, it's very much like you described, like more often than not, you feel like you're trapped or you don't have a lot of choices on how to get out of them. You might have friends who say, hey, what you're doing, can't you see how bad this is for you? You don't have all the freedom that you used to, but you just get blind to it. And this whole analogy about the hamster is wonderful because you have all this energy. Do you want to do something? You're trying to do something, and it's not going anywhere. You just need to shift your mindset a little bit, shift your focus, your energy, and your attention. So yeah, that's one. What so going to the podcast bit a little bit. I
Mm.
agree 100%. 100%. During COVID, we're all stuck at home. I think I listened to I don't know 50, 100 episodes from Joe Rogan and like so many other podcasts. And because it was lonely times, right? Everyone was going through
Yeah.
something, and during those times I don't know, I just learned so much. I just at some
Mm.
point I just felt Joe Rogan is my friend. Of course he's not, but but it feels like, right? It feels like you're part of the conversation, and
Yeah.
it's really wonderful. And that's actually what inspired me to create a podcast right now. I really hope
Mm.
like I can help other people as well, and it's really a
Yeah.
wonderful medium. Yeah,
It is. And I'm sure you are, and I'm
yeah.
so glad that you are sharing your voice. And there's no safety in silence. And
Mm.
unfortunately, to go back to, as you were really nicely summarizing the experience of someone who's gone through abuse, it's really important for me to make sure that if someone's listening and they're being abused and maybe they almost feel victim blamed when they hear some of those things like, you need to shift your energy, and they're thinking, well, how can I shift my energy? I'm basically stuck in a tornado and I don't know how to get out. That's okay. That's not your fault. But you do have choices, right? It is really important to understand that you do have choices and we can shift the momentum. But once you shift the momentum, right, that's going to hurt. That's going to be difficult. It might be scary and it might even be dangerous. So you do need to make sure that you do it safely. You need to make sure that you have a support system that you can truly trust. And that may have to be people that are not mutual connections if you're being abused between you and the abuser. often towards the end, that's really all that's left are people that there's mutual access to. And then when you share, then that information can be weaponized against you. Unfortunately, that happens all the time. Or
What?
because you're trauma bonded to the person, you're kind of want to convince them, like, I don't want to hurt you by saving me. Let me just convince you to understand what you're doing to me. It's really important to understand that they have to sleep at night too. They are invested in their story about what's happening. Their story is probably very different than your experience with them. It's not your job to convince them of what they're doing to you. They know what they're doing to you. They may have reframed it so, again, that they can keep doing it and feel that they're in the right. So, again, don't get stuck in that tornado. You only have so much energy. And when you're at the stage where you finally decide to leave, because unfortunately, because we haven't taught people often from a young age their worth and the importance of their autonomy and their freedom, we wait until we are just almost gone, until our energy is almost completely depleted. And that's a really difficult jumping off place to then go into that, what I call the messy middle of recovery from this abusive relationship, because it's very common that, there's financial constraints. You may not have access to your finances. There may be issues with food, where you're going to live, with your support system, with your mental health, not even necessarily because you have depression or anxiety, but because your nervous system is responding to the fact that all those factors I just discussed are present. So your basic human needs are not being met. You are not safe. And your nervous system is going to tell you that, because the brain, and especially the really prehistoric part of our brain that we share with other animals, right? Not these big, beautiful frontal lobes that come up with all these amazing things. The really prehistoric part of our brains that's, involved in setting off our fight and flight reflexes. Those part of our brains are going to be sending the signals to say, you're not safe. You're going to feel it maybe in your stomach. You're going to feel a tightness in your chest every time you think about this person, or them coming home, or you having to speak to them. That is not anxiety. That is a message from your nervous system that you're not safe, right? If there is something triggering that in you regularly, it's basically saying, pay attention to this. I'm going to keep telling you to pay attention to this until you listen to me. And unfortunately, if you don't listen to me, I'm just going to turn up the signal. And that signal, having cortisol and all of these chemicals running through your body, these stress hormones running through your body all the time, they're not good for you. But the problem is, the brain doesn't really care that it's long term not good for you. It just cares about helping you survive this moment, because it is telling you, I'm not safe. I trump everything else. Get me out of this situation. So until you develop the strength and the plan and make that progress towards your safety, unfortunately, your body is going to keep on doing this. So that's why we talk about, if you're not free, if you don't have freedom of choice, if you're in a relationship that doesn't allow you to be whole in yourself, there's really no way forward. There's no way to grow or be healthy in that situation.
This feeling that you mentioned, could we say it's the gut feeling?
Yes, yes. For many people, it is that gut feeling.
All right, yeah. I think I was watching an interview from Jeff Bezos the other day, and he said, like, you like I don't exactly remember the precise like phrases and quotes and words he used, but it was something around those lines, like, I'm surprised how many people don't just listen to their gut feelings. You would be
Mm,
surprised of how many of my decisions are based on my gut feeling. and
yeah.
um and I mean, he must know a thing or two about business and leadership, so I would trust him on that regard. And I mean, if he's doing it and he seems quite successful, in my opinion, in his endeavors, why wouldn't you or us all use it on our day-to-day lives and our relationships
Mm,
and stuff? Just seems
yeah.
wise, in my opinion. But I think it comes back a little bit to what we were saying. Like, that's not something that it's taught. It's something that you
Right.
you learn, or hopefully learn through a podcast now. That's amazing. But yeah. Um
Yeah. And through seeing, often women, not always women, also men, but it's really important for young people to see women in their homes being really free to make choices, being really free to disagree and speak up. So when people in my generation work on these mindset shifts, right? Then maybe they're not getting that education at school, but they're getting it at home. They're seeing moms able to disagree with dad. Mom's able to have a respectful conversation where she doesn't just go along to get along. And that's really important modeling. And that is going to, again, develop these ideas, concepts, and tracks in the brain of what is normal, right? Because if kids go out into the world thinking, due to culture or family system, that coercive control is normal, they're going to seek out a repeat of that because it feels like home, even though it doesn't feel good.
so you said culture of control, is that right?
Yes, a culture of control and coercive control. When, sometimes it's quite common, it's a abusive tactic where instead of saying, you go do this, it's more like, well, you really want to do this, make me happy, don't you? Right. So that's where coercion comes in. And then it's so smart and it's so manipulative and harmful. Because then on the other side, and this happens to children, not just grown-ups, right? And then on the other side, they can say, well, I didn't tell you to do that. You made that decision. And you're thinking, did I make that decision? And then you think back to what you said, well, I guess I did make that decision. But the reality is, you knew what the decision you were allowed to make, right? Because this isn't the first time this is how this was termed to you. And you know what the consequences are of not going along to get along. Right, whether those be consequences of being stonewalled, of receiving what we call the silent treatment, right, from someone who is really important to you in your life, or being physically reprimanded for that, which of course is illegal and unacceptable. But there's a wide variety of things that can happen, and for a child, being not spoken to by a parent is terrifying. So that can be enough to coerce them into doing all sorts of things because their survival depends on their relationship with their parents. No matter how dysfunctional that relationship may be, their survival depends on it. So it's pretty unusual for a child to even really speak up for themselves until they get to a certain age where they're able to. And that's why it's so important to show them, have these models around them. And that's a big thing that work I do. It's not just for my clients, it's for other generations of young people that are around them. When you teach them these new skills, those skills are going to be passed on and they are going to make the world safer and better for young people. And that's why I do what I do. And that's what I really hope and pray for.
All right, so yeah, thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit more about what you do. So, what's your day-to-day job?
Yeah, so right now I'm very focused on Talks with Dr. Shafer and building that up. So that's my podcast.
Yeah,
I do a mix of things with that. I
yeah.
do have wonderful guests on episodes. I air that once or twice a week to season. If it's a really busy season, I'm not
Okay.
going to bombard listeners with 2 episodes a week. But if it's a season where I know that people could use a little more support, then we'll do two. And I talk to everyone from therapists, authors. I've had a hypnotherapist on. I've undergone
Wow.
EMDR therapy on the show so that people could actually see what that looks like, to try to demystify some of these newer therapy techniques that can be really helpful with people who are coping with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, those sort of things, because they've gone through, a series of small events or a really big event in their life, and they need help getting through that. I also speak to survivors. I speak to people from all walks of life, cancer survivors, domestic abuse survivors. And so I'm really proud of those opportunities to highlight other people's stories and to spread that inspiration. But I also do once a week what I call a short talk with Dr. Shafer. And that's where I really get into more of the life coaching mini sessions where we talk about these really important concepts so that people can just hear them. It may be the first time they've ever thought about freedom from this different perspective, right? Often we think of freedom, we see a flag, we see a soldier, I'm free, thank goodness for their sacrifice. All of that is so true and so important to celebrate. But we stay on that level, but we don't necessarily consider, am I free in my life? Am I making choices that support my freedom? So, freedom is something that I might cover, or, boundaries, a really important thing. A lot of things about relationships, because I was really inspired not only through my experience as someone going through domestic abuse and also seeing how it affected my family and my life, my career. Also, when I was seeing patients in the office and I was seeing them for something serious like epilepsy, seizures, or their headache disorders, their multiple sclerosis, they've had a stroke, something as simple as taking a medication that's recommended. They may really want to to take a medication as prescribed, but there can be so many barriers to doing so, whether it's financial, whether there might be abuse in the home or control in the home, whether it might be, neurodevelopmental differences, issues with managing a clock, issues with just managing their space and their time. There can be so many reasons why someone isn't taking their medicine on time. And then there can be so much, right? There can be so much shame behind, oh my gosh, I like Dr. Shafer so much and I didn't take my medicine again. And then there was that other time I didn't take it. And oh my gosh, when I go in and see her, I'm just gonna tell her I'm taking it. I'm just gonna tell her I'm taking it. Is she gonna call my pharmacy? Is she gonna come look at my bottle? No, I'm
And
not gonna tell her because I don't want to disappoint her. Right. And there's so much shame in our culture that I think that bleeds into all these different facets of our lives, including our healthcare. And so for me, when I recognized how these things were affecting my life, and I was thinking back to so many times where it was kind of perplexing why something was happening. And usually I could really break down that issue and resolve it with the patient if we took more time than was honestly allotted to us in our short clinic visit, because that's unfortunately how medicine is now. You don't have that much time. We took more time than we were allotted to have and just said, hey, you know, let's figure this out. We're not doing well. Let's really break this down and really have honest conversations, figure it out, write out literally day by day for 2 weeks what we're going to do. Right? Because for some people to prioritize their health and really start this new medicine, they would need it to be written down every single day, the hour, what they were going to take it with. And that would be the thing that for them that would get them through because they'd really gone over it with me. And for them, that's what they needed. Or they needed to set an alarm in their phone and maybe they didn't have access to their phone. Maybe their partner was the only one who had access to their phone. So when the alarm went off, they wouldn't hear it. Right? You learn these things. And those are problems that if someone's not feeling safe, if someone's not feeling in control of their circumstances, this medicine is kind of the least of their problems because they're worried about their daily safety. So we as doctors, I think sometimes are kind of hitting our heads against a wall, trying to fix a problem, trying to decrease your risk of a stroke or help you treat your headaches that are still happening no matter how many medicines I prescribe you. But actually you're not taking the medicine because your partner's not letting you, or you're not taking the medicine because maybe it makes you feel a little off and you don't want to feel a little off. You feel like you really need to be on top of your game. Or maybe you're taking your medicine, but you're so scared all the time or so stressed all the time that your body doesn't really care about the medicine. The medicine's only going to help this much, and dealing with the safety would help that much, right? That would help a lot. And that's why really seeing people as whole human beings that have these basic needs, and not in that checkbox way that we do in clinic where we say, are you safe at home? Do you have guns at home? Do you, do you smoke? How much do you drink? And we do it in this very like checkbox way where it doesn't even really give the patient the opportunity to answer necessarily honestly, because that relationship hasn't even started yet, right? The openness of your interview hasn't started. They literally haven't taken their shoes off yet, and you're asking them all these really personal questions. And so that's where, for me, on my journey of needing to pivot, needing to really find my purpose and how I could be of best benefit to people in this world, I came into life coaching. It was really happening organically. Women in my community were reaching out to me, and I realized, okay, yeah, this is it. This is the calling. This is the direction where I can really take my skills as a neurologist, as a physician, as someone who's creative, as someone who loves to connect with others. I also have a degree in psychology. And so, as the person, the whole person I am, not just this one aspect of my personality, but as the whole person I am, this is my calling. This is how I can best serve others and help them heal and reclaim their stories, because I know now how incredibly important that is to live a full and healthy life, and that without it, health is not attainable.
How long do you take per session compared to this checkbox method?
Oh, yeah. So, when you're life coaching, those are usually an hour long.
An hour long.
Sometimes they go on longer, and that's okay. It's also important, though, to hold those boundaries, not necessarily even for yourself. It is important to hold those boundaries for yourself, but when you're working with clients, it's also important to again model for them your boundaries, so then they know it's okay. Because if you are like, oh, it's okay, we'll go over 20 minutes because it's a hard day, that's a wonderful gift in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not gifting them the knowledge that, you know what? We're going to be wrapping up in 10 minutes. I want to get you to a good place. I want you to show me how you can regulate out of this, because I know you have the tools. What are some tools you have in your toolbox that you want to try, and show them that even when crisis comes, they have tools to use, because the goal is not for them to need me to coach them every game. That is the opposite of the goal. The goal is for me to help facilitate in them, as someone standing and sitting beside them, to find their own gifts, to find their strengths, to disentangle themselves from all these limiting beliefs that they've been carrying around like a really, really heavy backpack all this time, and that's
Mm-hmm.
rooting them to the ground where they are, and decide, nope, what is here that's hindering my progress, my success, that's coming in between myself, my idea of myself, and my true self? And how can I adjust my thinking? And how can I change my habits and my choices to move towards my goals and leave the stuff that I don't need behind me?
So when it comes to boundaries,
Mm.
I would like to understand a little bit more what are considered healthy boundaries within a
Mm.
relationship.
Wow, that's such a good question. Can I turn it around?
Of course.
What would you say? You don't have to be personal about it, but how does it feel if I just say that you're you and that they're them? Like, imagine it's like a political conversation,
Oh
right? Like,
wow.
that's an easy way to get really polarized really, really fast, right? Like, whoo, we're there already, right? Two-party system. And there's one person from one party and there's one person from another party, right? Woo, this is a charged situation. And they want to talk. Well, what's the boundary that will keep us civil, and so that we are in a place where we can walk away friends?
Oh, that's a very interesting question because I never saw any of my relationships like that, like as a political party where we are
Mm.
kind of against each other. I always imagine like
Mm.
whenever I'm in a relationship, the mindset that I have is like we're together in this with the good and bad,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what you gain in life, like good stuff for you. I'm happy for you because I'm also gaining indirectly. I'm also winning indirectly because if
Ooh.
you're happy, I'm happy. If I'm happy, you should be happy. So that's very
Mm.
interesting that you just broke it. Just separated, put one here and
Yeah.
one. That's very interesting.
Well, I was like,
Um,
now that we're not stressed, right? Now
mm,
that we're in a place where we can think about this logically in our frontal lobes and our thinking part of our brains, and not in our feeling and emotional part of our brains, it's easy to talk about what we do in our wonderful relationships, right? They may not be perfect, but they're functioning and they're working for us and they're comfortable for us. But I think you really start to understand maybe some of the flaws or opportunities for growth in your
Yeah.
boundary setting, or even what your boundaries are when you think, you're like, okay, where's a place I can go that really pushes me to the limits of that emotional connection? Like my emotions are kind of at the surface, right? They're
Mm.
almost there. I've got all this baggage and all this history. It's not even just mine, it's cultural, it's everybody's baggage, right? What truth would allow me to approach the situation and stay calm in my nervous system, stay centered in myself? What universal truth would that be?
Well, my my answer would be respect,
Mm,
and that's it. If I don't have the choice to
yeah.
take some time out, relax, decompress, and then come back in a more civilized state, I would say respect, no matter what.
Respect for their freedom to be them, to have their choices and their feelings.
That included like a respect uh, for them as a whole, as a person.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And that includes all those things, right?
of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Res-
Well, and that's wonderful. And of course it does. But then let's take a step back and think about the discourse we've had in our lives and the miscommunications and the times where things didn't go well, where it wasn't the, situation you explained before, where it's like, well, if you need me, I'm there, and if I need you, you'll be there, and we're going to have this push and pull and compromise, and it's going to be beautiful because no
yeah.
matter what, we're going to respect each other, right? That beautiful relationship. I love it. And
But oh, and
And we have other relationships that we need to be able to cope with as well. And we need to really work on the skill set to do that ahead of time. And we need to, again, it's not about learning how to deal with that person, that problem. Oh, this person is such a problem. I need to learn how to deal with that. No, it's about doing that mindset work to kind of find out your little triggers and your little sinkholes that you can fall into and start like digging the wrong way, or like digging down, down, down into it instead of climbing out and being like, whew, I've got solid ground under me. I don't have to keep digging here. I respect that, you are you and I am me. I'd love to have a discussion with you about it. I'd love to learn about how you think. I'd love to feel safe to express how I think. And we will model that for one another. But it's not going to become a power play for someone leaving here believing in, buying into the other person's ideals. That may happen as an effect of what you discussed. But what often happens, it's this like real time power play where it's like, no, 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 I'm going to get you to think what I think. And again, it's that kind of coercive control and manipulation and shame gets utilized. And that's not connection and that's not education. That's just kind of a fight. And we don't want to use our energy fighting. It's wonderful to come and have discussions and share our perspective, our thoughts and feelings, but it's also so important to respect theirs and understand if it's different than yours and you would like to impart something upon them. Being dysregulated and kind of getting out of yourself and who you want to be isn't the way. It's more staying calm, staying centered, and showing a different way. Because maybe they're not going to respond to that in the moment. Likely they won't, but maybe they'll think about it later. So I think working on your boundaries and just saying, like, this is me. This is me. My nervous system is mine. My thoughts are mine. My emotions are mine. And when something gets triggered, which it will, because again, they're like, that's why I brought up this really like, whew, don't touch that topic, and we're not going to really go into it. But all you have to do is bring it up, and we kind of feel like, oof, the hairs stand up, right? We know that it can get really sticky. But the way we can try to avoid that is just really staying really calm and centered in ourselves. And that also allows us to use our listening skills better. So maybe this person has something to teach us that if we stay centered and regulated and don't go into fight or flight, don't get kind of historical about the conversation, but stay in the moment, maybe we can learn something from them as well.
Yeah, of course. I would say if you're with someone who believes a relationship is a power play, I mean, you should learn
Mm,
not to do it because, in my view of the world, relationships are not games. I'm not
no.
playing a playing something, a power game. That's not the whole point for me. So I would say if
Yeah.
there's a learning to be learned, yeah. Uh,
Yeah, a
it's
lesson to be learned.
sorry,
Yeah.
a lesson to be learned. Like it's not a game. At least that's what I
No.
think. Yeah.
I fully agree.
Yeah.
What tends to happen, and you're right, and that's why we talk about staying centered in yourself. So that's who you are, that's who I am, right? I don't want to fight. I don't want to argue. I just want to be free to be me. But what often happens with controlling and coercive people, they're really masters. They're not very well centered in themselves and their
Mm,
opinions. So they do feel really attached to getting you to buy in because they don't even necessarily fully buy into their worthiness or their feelings. So for them to feel safe, they need everyone around them to buy in too, right?
mm,
They're basically codependent on you to regulate their nervous system for them. And when you don't go along to get along, when you don't just buy in and you say, you know what, no, I feel differently than that, that's a threat to them because again, they're not very centered, they're not regulating themselves, they required your buy-in, you're not giving it to them, so that feels dangerous for them, and then they tend to lash out to you. And then what can happen if you haven't done that work and haven't become really centered in yourself, then you feel threatened because they're turning up the heat, they're turning up that controlling energy, and you're kind of thinking, well, hey, now I didn't do anything wrong. So then when we're a people pleaser or we're someone that maybe hasn't really invested in that self-work worth of and that work of understanding, me versus you, sometimes then we get pulled into that kind of tornadic force of that chaos. And then we want to defend ourselves and prove, well, no, I'm allowed to think what I'm allowed to think. But it sounds kind of almost ridiculous to someone who's very self regulated, maybe, because they're like, well, of course you are. But the thing is, so many of us are at that stage when we're 40, 35, 30, where we look back and we're like, why did I make those decisions? Why did I forfeit my youth? Why did I stay in that job? Why did I stay in that relationship? Why didn't I stand up for myself? You may have tried to, and again, some of these forces they pulled you in because you hadn't worked on that self-regulation to say that even when it gets really challenging, even when someone really, really, really wants to have me bite the bait, I'm not going to.
mm. Well, I think it's important to point out that not every relationship is like that. I think,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
I think from everything that we talked about so far, it sounds a hell lot like narcissistic personality behavior. Am
Mm.
I right? Is that like so, it's
Yeah,
kind of yeah?
yeah. Yeah, I try not to use labels like that if
Okay,
possible. I think, when you more describe the behaviors, it's more connecting because sometimes those labels, they have history for people
I see.
and they can be disconnecting, and we also don't want to diagnose anyone with anything if we're not their care provider. And that's not a criticism to you to using the word, but it's just kind of like a sidebar to it. But yes, there are certainly narcissistic characteristics that we see in culture and in relationships. And, unfortunately, I think when you look at psychopathy, antisocial behavior, I think the data is like 1 in 25 people. So while it's not everyone, it's not no one.
That's a
It is
lot.
it's a lot. And so this is not to prepare you for those peaceful, wonderful relationships. This is to prepare you to stay centered in yourself when you're challenged so you don't end up falling into one of these traps and spending a great deal of time in them. So I completely agree with you that we should not be looking for narcissism around us. We should not be looking for negativity. We should be really positively focused in our relationships. And that's actually what this mindset work is about. It's about no matter what happens around me, I'm going to stay centered on my goals, on my values, and my beliefs. And I am not going to, because I'm kind of thinking everybody thinks like me, right? I'm kind of having that naivete. I'm not going to accidentally fall into a pit where I can become victimized. I can, have my life not go the way that I want it to because I'm overly trusting. Being trusting is wonderful, but we also have to be critical thinkers, right? That is incredibly important and such a gift, not just when it comes to relationships, but when it comes to everything. The food we eat, the choices we make about, what we consume, right? We
Mhm.
have to be a critical thinker and we have to decide, I'm not going to do what an advertisement tells me to do just because they made it look fun. I'm not going to do what my friends are doing just because maybe they appear more successful than me. And so, drinking every night, I guess that's what successful people do. When young people see these things, they may truly believe, they may see the food commercial for something really unhealthy. And I've heard young people say, but look how good it, look how healthy the people are eating it on the TV are. It must be healthy. Because truly there are people who really believe that what they're seeing is true. And so teaching critical thinking and teaching just being aware of this and staying centered in yourself, I think is really valuable to keep people safe.
Well said. Yeah, but I think it's like a human behavior. We believe in what we see. Like I researched why so many people are fascinated by stars, by Tom Cruise, by The Rock, like those Hollywood movie stars. And the answer that I got online was that, of course, I don't know how valid it is, but it made sense to me at the time, was that we as humans, we kind of tend to believe what we see. So if we see Tom Cruise doing those
Mm,
incredible stunts that are obviously incredible, he also do them in real life, right? But he's always like has like a protection, and makes has
yes.
several takes. Same with The Rock. So we just see that in a movie, and then we attribute those values to that person, and we think instantly that they are perfect. They're superhuman, or a
Yeah.
very good musician. We just see that he plays very well. We love their music, and because this person has this one good quality for whatever reason, apparently we as humans we just attribute the whole person as someone who is good. I don't know why is that. Maybe it's easier for the brain to process because there's so many people. I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And we also, we need to fit into our community. That's
yeah.
a biological imperative for our safety, right? We need to believe good things about our families because we need to believe we're safe because truly we can't, we couldn't have gone out into the woods and survived on our own. There were predators. We didn't have what we needed to survive. So we do need to seek out that goodness in one another and that belief. But sometimes that can put us in danger. Unfortunately, I wish that wasn't the case. But I love the example that you gave. And I think it really reinforces the whole idea of practice these things. Do mindset work. If you have really big hurdles, you can talk to a therapist. You can talk to a life coach. You can listen to appropriate podcasts and read appropriate books and things to help you work on that mindset work. Because what you're seeing, Tom Cruise, he also is doing the work. And in this example, he's got a stunt double do things he shouldn't do because he knows his limits. He has a harness. He has things that we can't see,
Yeah.
right? And he also has really, really good insurance. He's planned for the future, right? He's planned for the future.
Yeah.
So he is doing what he needs to do to be safe. And I love that point because that's exactly what, you're doing with your podcast to share these messages and to provide a safe space for people. And what I'm doing with the work I do, we are trying to help people have the information so when they need it, they're prepared, right? That they're not caught without the skills that they need to face this and come out better on the other side. So we're like, I love that example. You're going to be like, Tom Cruise, I'm just giving you the safety harness, but you're out there doing the stunt because it's your movie. It's your movie. I love it.
Wonderful. All right. Well, let's end there. So, Dr. Schaefer, where people can find you, if you have any links that you'd like to share, anything else, now is the moment.
Yeah, wonderful. Anyone can find me on my website, www.drshaferstedronova.com. That's difficult to spell. I apologize for that, but it's all in a name. And you can find me more easily, perhaps, on Talks with Dr. Schaefer. I'm, of course, on Facebook, TikTok, wow, TikTok, that's the next one. Um, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. You can find me on Spotify, iHeart, Apple, Amazon, anywhere. I really try to send out this message in a lot of different forms between blog posts, my podcast in short and long form, short reels, especially on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, so that then, I found in my healing journey, it was really great to have just a short little reel. Maybe if I was having a difficult moment of, feeling someone sitting beside me because maybe I didn't feel safe to have someone to talk to in that moment, but I could feel that community with someone who's going through what I was going through. And that would change week by week. And that's why I tried to have a variety of content. I also do have an online community called We Don't Tell Our Stories. And that's on Facebook as well as a website, www.wedon'ttellOurstories.com, with an upcoming book with survivor stories that is just that, a safe space where people who have survived or are dealing with domestic abuse can come to be inspired by other stories, by music, articles, podcasts, all sorts of resources, and also can get linked into coaching if that's something they feel they would benefit from with me, Dr. Shafer, so that they can understand the value of their story and understand that they can tell it in safe places. They just have to find the way to do that. We can't live in the darkness. We have to find a way to live in the light together.
Wow. Wonderful. Dr. Shafer, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much for having me. It was such a fun conversation.
Yes, it was. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. If it's your first time watching, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to rank the show 5 stars. This will ensure that the podcast will be recommended to even more people and allow me to keep doing what I love. Check out now the BruCast store, Explorer store filled with awesome goodies from hoodies to t-shirts to mugs. We've got you covered. Stay in style with BruCast. Embrace the shock, set the trend. Buy now at brew-cast.com/store. I repeat, brew-cast.com/store. Link on the description below. BruCast also on Instagram, X, and TikTok, where we upload shorts with the highlights of the show. So follow now BruCast on Instagram, X, and TikTok. All right, that's been it. Thank you very much, everyone. See you next time. Thank you very much, Dr. Shafer. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you.